Hi guys, welcome back, and if you're new here, I'm Nessie. Today I'm making lots of little accessories to go with the new kitchen island, starting with some potatoes. Use polymer clay to roll a bunch of little ovals. Remember, potatoes come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, so they don't have to be perfect. Use a dotting tool, barbecue skewer or toothpick to add texture and little dimples in the potatoes. Next I rolled the clay potatoes in brown chalk pastel. I noticed some of the little dimples were still exposed, so I used a small brush to dust the brown chalk into them. It was about this point when I remembered I should have coloured the potatoes before I made all the little dimples. After washing my hands, I grabbed some more of the creamy coloured polymer clay and made some equal sized balls so I can make Swedes, which are also known as rudabakers in the USA. They're a common winter crop grown where I live, both as human food and as livestock fodder, and can sometimes grow as big as your head. I found the little scales I'm using on AliExpress, and they're a great way of ensuring you have the same size balls. To shape the Swedes, I'm pinching a point at one end and slightly flattening out the other end. Then I poke a hole into the flatter end to add the stalk later on. Some of the points can be longer and some can be short and stubby, just like real ones. So real Swedes usually have a white tip, a band of pinky purple colour around the middle and a tinge of green around the stalk base at the top. So I started off with dry brushing chalk pastels on for colour, but I felt it wasn't nearly vibrant enough. So just a tiny bit of water helped the colour go on much better. But I mean, you literally want the tiniest dab of water or your chalk powder could end up a soggy mess. Don't forget, a full list of all the materials used in this video is in the description below. And while you're at it, check out the link to my Nessie Monster merch, where you can buy the cute designs I've created on stickers, t-shirts, mugs, phone cases and more. For the stalks, roll out the skinniest snake of green clay that you can manage and cut off pieces about 2 mm long. Pinch a group of 3 stalk pieces together at one end to make a bundle of cut stalks. Add a dab of Bond and Bake or liquid clay into the hole at the top of the Swedes and place the stalk bundle in each. Usually I bake my clay items on an old ceramic tile, but these veggies were threatening to roll all over the place, so I made little tinfoil baskets to hold them while they bake. As you can see, they're really simple to make and no veggies were lost in the making of this video. Another trick I use when I bake polymer clay is I make a tint of foil over them to prevent any accidental scorching of the lighter colour pieces, and you can reuse the foil tint many times over. So here they are, freshly baked. All brands of polymer clay are slightly different, so refer to your packaging for baking instructions. My hessian or sacking cloth is far too out of scale for what I need, so I found some fabric with the right size weave, but it's the wrong colour. I'm going to experiment with some tea and instant coffee to see if I can dye the fabric the right colour. I know you can dye paper with tea and coffee to give it an aged look, so I'll give a couple of fabric swatches a try. After just a few minutes I can see coffee is the winner, and even after rinsing off the excess, the coffee stain is still a lot closer to the colour I wanted. And here we have the fabric to make the sacks. I started off gluing the edges of the sacks together to avoid sewing, but it just wasn't going to stick. I ended up sewing a tiny blanket stitch all the way around the seams of the sack with a couple of strands of embroidery thread. I haven't done any embroidery in a long time, so yes, I am as awkward as this looks. With that painfully slow stitching over, I can stuff my veggies into their sacks. I'm not gluing them in because I might want to play with them later. Go buy yourself a delicious popsicle because you need the stick for this next bit. I worked out the size of the tea towel rack and the paper towel holder based on the size of the spaces where I wanted to put them on the island. All I needed here was one popsicle stick, a toothpick, 3 sewing pins and some beads. Mark and cut out the pieces of popsicle stick. I used the curved ends for the paper towel holder sides. I keep double checking against the grid on my cutting mat to make sure my cut lines are drawn on straight. You can cut them out any way you want. I started off with my craft knife and quickly lost patience and grabbed my angle cutters. Sand all the cut edges. I also sanded the diagonal corners on the towel rack instead of cutting them. I worked out where I wanted the towel pegs to sit. I didn't get them in a perfect line, but that only haunts me in my dreams now, so I'm fine with it. I used an awl to poke the holes for the towel pegs. I made sure the sewing pins could fit in the holes, carefully avoiding stabbing myself for once. I wrestled with my gummed up super glue gel to get some glue on the pins before sliding down the beads to form the tail pegs. Work quickly or the beads may get stuck in the wrong place. Trust me, I know from experience. Just like I did with the kitchen taps, I painted them with a black base coat, and later you'll see brushed on some copper when that was dry. I stained both the towel rack and the paper towel pieces with the same wash of watered down burnt umber, but if you wanted yours pink or rainbow, go for it. Remember, it's your dollhouse, do it your way. I varnished all the wooden bits. As if by magic, I've managed to lose the footage of making the roll of paper towel, so I'll explain the process while you watch me glue everything together with tacky glue. The bar in the paper towel holder is a toothpick, so to make a slightly bigger roll, I wrapped some brown paper from a grocery bag around a thicker barbecue skewer and glued it together with tacky glue. Then I cut a strip of kitchen towel the same width as the roll and split the layers so I only had one ply. I glued the end to the brown paper roll and just rolled it up. I added a drop of glue towards the end so it doesn't come unravelled again, and the rest of the paper towel was kept for paintbrush blotting and wiping up my inevitable messes. The pins fit so snugly into the peg holes that I didn't bother to glue them. Use wire cutters to trim off the excess pin stalk poking out the back. I couldn't get them cut off entirely flush, so I filed them down a bit. Now I'm just super gluing them into position on the island. Make sure you have your paper towels facing the right way. Now what use is a towel rack if you don't have a towel hanging on it, or an oven mitt for that matter? Take a tiny scrap of toweling and add a fancy trim of your choice. I tried being extra fancy and wrapping the ends of the ribbon around the towel and regretted my life choices soon after. I wised up and cut the lace trim to size instead. After having to clamp the ends of the ribbon in place while they dried, I tried to shape the tea towel so it draped nicely on the hook by hanging it on a piece of doweling and brushing it with watered down glue and clamping it into position. Once I carefully peeled the towel off the doweling and dry fit it on the tea towel rack, I noticed there was an issue. The metal clamp left brown marks on the towel where it held it. The clamp itself isn't rusty, but it still left rust stains. No worries, I can fix this. I made a light wash with a very watered down rust colour paint and stained the towel to match. The rust stains were gone, and the tea towel was a better colour for the kitchen. Then I went all cottagecore and folk arty by painting a tiny row of flowers on the towel too. And now for an oven mitt or pot holder. What do you call them in your country? Anyway, I'm using felt, a scrap of fabric and some ribbon to make it. And in all honesty, it probably took me longer to make this by gluing it and clamping it down and waiting for the glue to dry than it would have if I just sewed it. It also ended up being a touch bigger than it should be scale-wise, but Papa has some pretty big oven dishes, so it might be useful for him to have an oversized oven mitt. The glue I'm using here is fabric glue, but Tacky glue would work pretty well too. After working out the best starting point, I began gluing on the ribbon around the edge. I wanted it to fold over the edges front to back like bias binding. Snipping at the corners helped the ribbon to fold over better. I clamped it while it dried to keep it in place. The ribbon was too wide to make a loop to hang up the oven mitt, so I used some embroidery floss and tucked the ends inside the ribbon binding. It's time to trim off the excess, but this is a job that calls for little scissors. Okay, that's all done. Now let's stick them on. Baskets! Yes, we need a couple of baskets for storage. I'm making these as simply as I can, and they're not very refined, but they do the job. I've got a base for the basket cut to the right size for the shelf out of scrap 2mm cardstock, paper covered floral wire, some thin twine and tacky glue. I poked holes all around the edge of the basket base. Make sure to have an uneven number of holes. This means you'll be able to weave the sides of your basket in one continual go. If you have an even number of holes, you'll end up having to weave each row individually, and that's a lot of loose ends to weave in. You can see how my rows of holes aren't very straight. I'm going to go ahead and call it rustic. Now cut your floral wire into lengths, just a bit longer than you want for the height of the basket, and make sure you cut 4 pieces about 2.5 inches long for the handles later. Add a drop of tacky glue to each hole and poke the wires in, then leave them until it's fully dry. The piece of blue card here shows how high I want the finished basket to be. It makes a useful quick reference for when I'm weaving those sides. I'm gluing down the end of the twine to the base. It works best if you try to flatten down the fibres on the end. It is kind of awkward trying to work inside a tiny cage-like space. Now, while initially pinning the end down because I can't wait for the glue to dry, I start weaving the twine in and out around the wires, occasionally adding a drop of glue here and there to secure it. I was struggling to see the wires at times, so I found that having a scrap of cardboard sitting in the middle made it less visually confusing. It really did make a big difference. So when I reached the height I wanted, I added a little glue to stick down the end before I cut it off. While that glue was setting, I trimmed off the excess wires. Now I trimmed the excess twine off, and the next step was to glue a nice neat row of twine as the top row trim. You could add a row of braided cord if you preferred, or whatever else that takes your fancy. Press it down firmly and cut off the excess. To make the handles, twist 2 of the longer pieces of wire together. Curve it into a handle shape. Cut off the excess with wire cutters. And glue it into place at one end of the basket. Really try to push the wire into the basket weave. Next up, I sanded the base corners to round them off. I coloured in the edges with a marker. Let's check for the fit. Perfect fit, but they need something inside them now. So here I am just making some fake folded towels and tablecloth to store in the baskets. It really doesn't take a lot to fill the baskets up. Awesome, let's check out the final results and see what the gnomes think. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new uploads, and leave a comment because I'd love to hear from you. It really helps my channel to grow. If you want to share your own crafty ideas and projects, join my Facebook page called Nessie Monster Crafts. We have Fun Day Fridays where we can all show off our latest works in progress. If you can afford it, please consider buying me a coffee. Links for both my Facebook group and coffee account are in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!